Vitruvius points to the men who work with lead. Their bodies are pale and weakened, so his recommendation is blunt. Drinking water should travel through clay, not lead. Rome keeps using lead anyway. Romans send water through lead pipes and patch food containers with lead clamps. Some cooks may even boil grape syrup inside lead vessels before mixing it into wine. Beyond the city, silver mines release enough lead for traces to remain inside Arctic ice 2,000 years later. Yet the fountains keep running, the population keeps growing, and the empire survives for centuries. So how can a civilization recognize a poison, spread it through water, food, and air, and still keep functioning? The mistake is imagining Rome as one giant person drinking from one giant cup. Ancient people were not immune, and lead damaged their bodies just as it damages ours. But Rome contained millions of bodies, receiving different forms and amounts of the same metal. To follow the damage, keep 3 dials in mind: where the lead comes from, how much enters the body, and who receives it. Turn any one of those dials, and the result can shift from no obvious symptom to seizures, paralysis, and death. Nobody was pouring molten lead into a cup, of course. Lead melts at about 327 degrees Celsius, so drinking it directly would introduce several more immediate concerns. The danger came from tiny particles and dissolved compounds entering water, wine, food, dust, cosmetics, and smoke. Often there was no warning taste, no sudden collapse, and no clear moment when anyone could say, "That did it." This made lead especially useful, because it could cause harm without appearing to interrupt the job it was doing. And lead did many jobs extremely well. It melted more easily than copper, bent without cracking, sealed gaps, resisted corrosion, and took almost any shape. Ancient builders used it to join stone and anchor ironwork. Craftsmen turned it into weights, containers, roof coverings, sling bullets, and repairs for broken pottery. Plumbers rolled sheets of it into pipes, which is why the Latin word, plumbum, still hides inside plumbing. Most importantly, lead often arrived as a byproduct of something rulers wanted even more: silver. Miners dug up ore containing both metals, then crushed and heated it until valuable silver emerged, beside a much larger pile of lead. The silver became coins, while the lead was too useful to waste. This bargain appeared long before Rome. Human-made lead pollution shows up in northern Greek sediments from roughly 5,200 years ago, where early metalworking left a chemical trace that outlived the people who made it. Egyptians used lead compounds in eye cosmetics. Greek mines released lead while producing silver. Across the ancient world, lead entered pigments, glazes, medicines, household objects, and eventually large water systems. Rome did not invent the problem. Rome simply took it to industrial scale. At its peak, the empire may have produced around 80,000 tons of lead each year, a level Europe would not reach again until much later. That much metal does not remain politely inside finished products. It escapes from mines, rises from furnaces, settles in soil, enters water, and follows workers home as dust. But before asking how much escaped, we need to see what happens after lead enters a body. Lead has no useful role in human biology. The body has no special system waiting to remove it. Instead, lead resembles minerals the body actually needs, especially calcium, so it can slip through some of the same doors and interfere with the machinery inside. It disrupts enzymes, damages nerves and kidneys, and interferes with the production of healthy blood. At a high dose, the result is dramatic: violent abdominal pain, weakness, confusion, seizures, coma, sometimes death. At a lower dose, the result may be tiredness, headaches, constipation, irritability, or nothing a person would recognize. Children face the greatest danger because their brains are still developing, and their bodies absorb a larger share of swallowed lead than adult bodies do. Low exposure can affect attention, learning, behavior, and mental ability without creating one spectacular medical emergency. There is no known safe level of lead in a child's blood. Yet no safe level does not mean every dose causes the same visible injury. It means the risk begins before the victim looks poisoned, which is exactly why an ancient city could function while lead quietly reduced the health and ability of people inside it. The body also stores much of its lead in bones and teeth. Some can remain there for decades, turning the skeleton into a record of exposure and a source that can release lead later. Nutrition changes the risk as well. A person lacking iron or calcium may absorb more lead from the same contaminated meal, so a well-fed adult and an undernourished child can share a table without receiving the same internal dose. The giant cup picture begins to break apart inside the Roman water system. This system turns the first two dials at once, source and dose. The great Roman aqueducts were not enormous lead tubes stretching across the countryside. Water usually traveled through stone, brick, concrete channels, and tunnels, crossing valleys on bridges when the landscape demanded it, then entering distribution tanks near the town or city. Lead became important near the end of the journey, where smaller pipes carried water toward fountains, baths, workshops, and wealthy private homes. That means some Roman drinking water definitely touched lead. It does not tell us how much entered the water. For that, chemistry matters more than the simple presence of a pipe. Many Roman springs produced hard water rich in dissolved calcium. As that water moved through a pipe, calcium carbonate collected on the inside, forming a pale crust similar to the scale inside a modern kettle. Over time, that crust reduced direct contact between water and metal. It was not magical armor. New pipes, repairs, acidic water, and broken scale could still release lead, but an old, heavily coated pipe carrying hard water behaved differently from a new pipe carrying soft, acidic water. Flow changed the dose again. Many Roman fountains ran continuously, so water did not always sit inside the pipe for hours before someone drank it. Less time touching the metal generally meant less time available for lead to dissolve. Then there was the question of access. Most urban residents did not have a private tap beside the kitchen. They collected water from public fountains, wells, basins, or cisterns, while richer households were more likely to receive piped water directly inside the property. Two families living on the same street could therefore drink water that reached them through different routes. Roman pipes did release lead, and researchers have found its traces far beyond the pipes themselves. They examined lead preserved in sediments from ancient Roman harbors, then compared its chemical signature with the metal used in the city's plumbing. Their reconstruction suggests Roman tap water contained roughly 100 times more lead than nearby natural spring water. That number sounds horrifying, but it needs the right comparison. It means 100 times a very low natural background, not 100 times a modern limit, and certainly not 100 times a fatal dose. The researchers concluded that plumbing clearly contaminated the water, but probably not enough to cause severe, citywide poisoning under normal conditions. That does not make the water harmless. Chronic exposure begins below the level where people collapse in the street. The pipe explains one source and part of the dose, but not the whole exposure. Once the pipe stops being the single villain, a more dangerous object comes into view: the cooking pot. Romans often boiled grape juice until much of the water disappeared, leaving a thick syrup known as defrutum or sapa. That syrup could sweeten wine, preserve fruit, and flavor food, making it a useful ingredient in a Roman kitchen. Some ancient writers recommended preparing it in lead or lead-lined vessels. Warm grape juice is acidic, and acid encourages lead to move from the vessel into the liquid. The process could form sweet-tasting lead compounds, including lead acetate, which later Europeans would call sugar of lead, with impressive honesty and terrible judgment. A Roman cook could therefore boil down grape juice, dissolve more lead as the liquid became concentrated, then taste the result and decide the pot had improved the recipe. If leaded syrup entered wine regularly, the dose could be much larger than anything released by an encrusted pipe. That possibility helped create one of the neatest explanations for Rome's decline. Wealthy Romans drank more expensive wine, used more elaborate cookware, and had private plumbing. Lead can damage the kidneys and nervous system, and heavy exposure can harm reproduction. Roman elites had reputations for gout, infertility, and spectacularly poor decisions. Therefore, the aristocracy poisoned itself and dragged the empire down with it. It is a satisfying theory. It is also much cleaner than the evidence. Ancient recipes prove that some people knew about lead vessels, but they do not prove that every cook used one, or that every batch of syrup became heavily contaminated. Chemical tests on surviving wine containers have produced mixed results. Lead objects were also valuable enough to recycle, so the archaeological record is incomplete. The practice may have been common in one region, rare in another, fashionable for a time, or limited to certain households. Some consumers probably received dangerous doses from food and wine. That is very different from saying the whole empire drank the same poisoned vintage. Even the glamorous wine theory may distract from duller household risks. Romans frequently repaired cracked pottery with lead clamps, plugs, and patches, and those repairs could touch water, sauces, preserved fruit, or other acidic food again and again. A patched kitchen jar is less memorable than a senator's poisoned goblet, but history is full of important objects with terrible marketing. The mining district turns all three dials at once. The source becomes dust and smoke, the dose rises near the furnace, and the people receiving it have little protection. To make silver and lead on Rome's scale, workers had to crush ore, feed furnaces, move slag, and breathe. Each stage released contaminated dust or fumes. Mining districts such as Lorion in Greece and major Roman sites in Spain and Britain spread lead through workshops, homes, fields, streams, and the lungs of nearby families. The people closest to this pollution were often enslaved workers, poor laborers, craftsmen, and children. Their exposure could be intense, but their suffering was easy for elite writers to overlook, and easy for the economy to replace. That is not resistance to poison. It is a social system hiding the casualties. Some of the pollution traveled much farther. Lead particles rose into the atmosphere, crossed Europe, fell with snow in the Arctic, and became sealed inside layers of ice that scientists can now date year by year. When Roman mining expanded, lead in the ice increased. When wars, plagues, or political crises disrupted production, it fell. When mining recovered, it rose again. The empire accidentally wrote part of its economic history in pollution. A recent study used those ice cores and modern atmospheric models to estimate how Roman-era air pollution may have affected children across Europe. The researchers calculated an average increase of about 2.4 micrograms of lead per deciliter of blood, enough, according to modern health data, to reduce average IQ by roughly 2.5 to 3 points. Those numbers are estimates, not measurements taken from Roman children. They depend on assumptions about ancient emissions, wind patterns, human exposure, and the way modern data apply to the past. But they reveal the scale of the real problem. A 3-point average reduction does not make an empire forget how roads work. Markets still open, soldiers still march, taxes still arrive, and lawyers remain fully capable of making everything take longer. Yet move the average of an entire population, and more children struggle, more adults carry illness, and a great deal of human ability disappears without a named victim. The damage is real even when society keeps operating. This was also the kind of damage ancient observers were least equipped to recognize. Vitruvius could see sick workers, connect their condition to lead, and distrust the pipes carrying Roman water. What he could not see was the harm spreading through children who showed no dramatic symptom. Romans had no blood tests, long-term childhood studies, or statistics linking small doses to later difficulties. They could know that lead was dangerous without knowing every dangerous way it behaved. And knowledge alone does not remove a useful material. Modern societies knew lead could cause poisoning while putting it in paint, gasoline, pipes, toys, and household products. Lead paint lasted. Leaded gasoline made engines run smoothly, and replacing pipes cost money. The benefit arrived immediately. Much of the damage arrived later, often in somebody else's child. The Romans were not uniquely foolish. They were uncomfortably similar to us. But if written records missed most slow poisoning, perhaps bones can reveal it. Bones do absorb lead during life, and teeth can preserve evidence of childhood exposure. The difficulty is that a skeleton also spends centuries underground, where water and soil can add metals after death and confuse the result. Researchers therefore compare different bones, teeth, chemical signatures, burial conditions, and signs of disease before drawing conclusions. What they find is not one clean Roman number. Some individuals carried very high lead levels. Some infants show elevated lead alongside evidence of serious illness. Other Roman groups show much lower averages, and results vary sharply between places and periods. That uneven pattern fits the world we have already seen. Different water, different food, different jobs, different wealth, different ages, and different bodies. A child beside a Spanish smelter did not face the same exposure as a Syrian farmer drinking from a local well, or a senator consuming sweetened wine in a house with private plumbing. There was no single Roman dose because there was no single Roman life. Did ancient people evolve greater tolerance? There is little evidence that they did. Lead attacks basic systems shared by all humans, while ancient exposure changed constantly with place, class, and occupation. Many effects were subtle or appeared after childhood, and some became serious only after a person had already raised children. That creates much weaker evolutionary pressure than a poison that kills every exposed child immediately. Ancient people did not defeat lead biologically. They lived with the damage. Now the word survive finally becomes the center of the story. A civilization is not one patient whose health can be checked. It is a network of families, farms, workshops, institutions, laws, armies, and systems for replacing whoever is lost. That network can continue while many individuals are sick. It can grow while pushing the worst danger onto minors, enslaved workers, poor neighborhoods, and children with little protection. It can build fountains and temples while losing abilities that nobody knows how to measure. When we say Rome survived lead, we mean the system continued. We do not mean the people inside it escaped unharmed. This is why lead also fails as a simple explanation for Rome's fall. The Western Empire struggled through civil wars, invasions, epidemics, political breakdown, and financial pressure over several centuries. Meanwhile, the Eastern Empire continued for almost another 1,000 years. Lead may have worsened health and reduced human potential, but the evidence does not support one poison neatly switching off an entire civilization. Even the fall in lead pollution after Roman decline can mislead us. When mines close and furnaces go cold, pollution drops. Economic collapse cleans the ice whether lead caused that collapse or not. The one villain theory survives because it is satisfying. Real history usually arrives with a committee. The better comparison is not another ancient empire. It is the modern world. For much of the 20th century, people breathed exhaust from leaded gasoline, lived beside roads coated in contaminated dust, painted nurseries with lead paint, and drank water from lead service lines. Cities functioned, and economies grew, but children were still harmed. Once researchers measured blood lead and followed development over time, why isn't everyone collapsing? Stopped sounding like evidence of safety. Collapse had never been the right test. Return to that Roman fountain, where clear water pours into a crowded street. The aqueduct works, the pipe holds, people fill their jars, and the city looks brilliantly engineered. All of that can be true, while lead enters some of the water. More lead enters the air around distant mines, and the largest cost falls on people history barely records. Ancient civilizations survived because there was never one giant cup or one shared dose. Sources differed, exposure was unequal, and the people hit hardest were easiest for the system to ignore. The water kept running. That was never the same as everyone being safe.